Thank you for joining us for today's Forward Thinking at Bison Roundtable. I'm Sharon Strange-Lewis. I am the Director of Alumni Relations at Howard University. Today's topic is Journey to the C-Suite. Our goal today is to equip our alums with information that will help them create their individual paths to that Covenant Corner office. This program is in collaboration with the CFO Leadership Council. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our dynamic moderator, Dr. Curtis Kidd. He is the director of the Center for Financial Excellence at Howard University School of Business. In this role, he leads a team of academics, practicing professionals, and research associates toward the center's mandate of increasing diversity within the financial services industry. He's also an adjunct faculty member at Howard University, teaching several economic courses. He's the recipient of the African Business Fellowship, and he is also a Howard alum with a degree, a master's degree and a PhD. And you know, with this type of pedigree, our students are in very good hands. So with that being said, Dr. Kidd, let the roundtable begin.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate the accolades. So we are here today to basically discuss some of the more basic issues around being a chief financial officer. What is a CFO? And why is the CFO integral to business operations? All the way to what skills do I need, or what skills are paramount in becoming a successful CFO, and maybe even how has that role changed across the history of business and its operations, and what will the role look like in the future? And so with me today, I have, of course, esteemed guests, and one of which is Thomas Dominique, who currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer at Battles Transportation, which just acquired, if I'm not mistaken, RHG Group, who I think, Thomas, you played a pivotal role in that M&A transaction. The Regional Diversified Transportation Company has offices in DC, right, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles, right? And the combined company is one of the largest minority-owned businesses in transportation and the logistics space. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, of course. We also have Kim Singleton, who is an accomplished business leader with over 30 years of experience in entertainment and media. In her various positions at Fox and Viacom, CBS, Singleton provided strategic financial leadership in multiple areas, including project management, budgeting, forecasting, reporting, and other international operations and business systems. Singleton is also a writer, a poet, and a filmmaker, directing and producing films and plays both domestically and internationally. She is currently the president and CEO of SS2K Media, where she merges her business and creative acumen to provide production services and create cost-effective digital content. Ms. Singleton, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Last but certainly not least, we have Caroline Boyce, who is a National Membership Manager and Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the CFO Leadership Council. And this council is a professional association whose mission is to empower senior financial executives to realize success. I'm thinking specifically CFOs and future CFOs, and get them to the C-suite, right? She's responsible for member recruitment and retention, onboarding new members, and working with chapter directors to optimize the member experience. Welcome, Ms. Caroline Boyce.
Well, Dr. Kidd, I just love that. And I just want to thank you and Kim and Thomas and Sharon for working on this program with us. Sharon and I have been working together for 6 months on this program. So we're so happy that has come to fruition. So thank you.
Finally, we always say at Howard, it will happen eventually.
Exactly.
All right, so how about we dive in, panelists? Thomas, let me go directly to you. And I know we're starting off at a rudimentary level, but what is a CFO? I mean, what's the typical roles, the skills, and why does a company actually need a CFO?
Definitely. And once again, thank you, Caroline, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I love Howard with all my heart, so it gives me great pleasure to be in this forum and to give back to the Bison community and the Bison Nation. Dr. Curtis Kidd, you and I have been talking for the past couple of months, a couple of different initiatives around finance. And, I think the CFO plays a very integral part in any organization. And one caveat is large or small. Anytime you need an objective look at the financial condition of the company, you need somebody who is not a part of who is a part of the executive team, but not a part of the day-to-day operations, and who's tied into strategy, but can be objective when they look at the numbers and see, does the strategy actually make sense? And that's where the CFO comes in. I mean, that person is, responsible for making sure that the organization has the resources that they need to execute the strategy, but then on the back end, have the acumen and tools and technical skills to go back and review the condition of the company to make sure that they're actually achieving those goals. And the role has evolved, and then we're going to dive into that more. But CFOs, you're right there at the table, sort of guiding the principles of the firm to make sure that limited financial resources are used in the best way. And I always say, you're trying to generate the most effective return on invested capital.
Okay, great answer. Caroline, I know that you tend to work with those types often. Do you have anything else to say as to help our audience sort of place and define what a CFO is?
Well, I always like to Google everything, and I have lots of notes, and I always like to, as I was going to be a teacher myself, Dr. Kidd, I always like to get the definition out. So the CFO, alongside with other C-suite positions like a COO, rank just below the CEO. So a CFO's duties impact the success of a company, just like what Thomas was talking about, but they still must report under a CEO. Forecasting the organization's financial standing based on financial and operational data and reports provided by the finance and accounting teams. And they're also advising the CEO and board on strategic direction. So Thomas, you hit most of it. You're really good. But that's the specific definition of what a CFO does.
Okay, so then let me swing it to you, Kim. Tell me what is the difference between a CFO, and I've heard of a comptroller, I've heard of a controller, of a certified public accountant. What's the difference here?
Okay, well, let me start with, well, thank you everyone for having me. Let me start with the position of the controller. The controller, I look at someone who oversees all the accounting aspects of it. Their responsibility is to accurately record the transactions of all the financial operations that have occurred. A CPA is a certification. It's not necessarily a job description, but it just tells people that you are certified to be a public accountant. And that person can be a CFO, could be a controller, could be on the finance team. You had mentioned a CEO, and that's a person who kind of oversees the entire company. I look at the CFO, who is responsible for strategic financial directives, similar to what Thomas said. I always like to compare when people ask me, well, what's the difference between the controller position and the finance position? I say that the controller position, they record what we've actually spent. The CFO and the finance, they take that information and they project the strategic direction financially of an organization. They do the budgeting, they do the forecasting, they do the long-range planning. So the controller is the person who records the transactions and accurately reports on what we spent. And the CFO is the person that takes this information and drives the strategic plan for the company.
So let me push you a bit on that point, Kim. Does a CFO have to, or would it be best to have a certification such as a CPA or CFA? Does that make it better for them?
I have two thoughts on that. I personally don't think you need to. I don't have a CPA, but I was a team leader for CPAs, and I happen to have more experience in accounting and knew more than that. But I do believe as people of color that we should get our certification so that it's not one thing they can use against us to not give us a position. Many of the people who worked with me and worked for me, I always encourage them to get your credentials, because when you go for that position, you don't want them to say, well, we're only looking for CPAs, because I've had that said to me. So I'm always pushing for those credentials so that, you know, you just have a solid foundation when you try to climb up the ladder.
Understood.
Oh, can I
Thomas,
also add to that too?
Sure.
One of the things I think even Kim and I were talking about this, and I was talking with other CFOs. Now I'm noticing more and more CFOs are getting their MBAs. So not only are they getting their certificates, but they're also going for their MBAs. I know, Kim, you went for your MBA, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Because it's all about now, CFOs now need to have strategy and operations so they can be successful in collaborating. When you have that MBA degree, it helps.
Okay, Thomas, you have your MBA. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. You know, if you pursue the CPA, I mean, it never hurts you in your journey. I think it just depends on what type of professional you want to be. I tend to think of CPAs as more for folks that want to work at public accounting firms. But if you, like myself, I studied finance undergrad. So after undergrad, I started in corporate banking. So a lot of that finance and accounting stuff, it was applied every day. And it just, you know, it built up my business acumen to the point where, you know, I feel comfortable in a room full of CPAs. I work very closely with my firm's CPA, because we have to ultimately sort of tell them why we did what we did. And then they take it and they put it in, you know, the public accounting world to see whether or not it applies to GAAP principles and how we record it and how we, you know, we file tax returns and how we do reviews and audits. But I don't think it definitely, you know, doesn't hurt. I think sometimes it just depends on your journey and kind of where you start. But for me, I do feel, you know, and especially after getting my MBA, I do feel very comfortable with not having the CPA, but I would say it definitely doesn't hurt to have that, and, you know, very well respected credential. But I tend to think, like Caroline, MBA is more about finance and strategy, whereas CPA is more about the technical side of things. But when you do a deal, like the recent acquisition that we done, I mean, we had attorneys at the table and we had a whole bunch of CPAs on both sides going back and forth, and I was in the middle of it, but I felt very comfortable, you know, given my background and being able to negotiate terms and, you know, speak the language of all the various parties.
Okay, so you hit on something there, Thomas, that is a good transition to my next sort of topics here. And I'm going to be really specific and get a little bit personal, if that's okay. Why did you become, or let me say, put yourself on the trajectory of being a CFO?
Definitely. You know what? I have a very, you know, a pretty unique background. Like I said, I started in corporate banking after I finished at Howard and went to Chicago, went through a credit analyst program at LaSalle Bank. And the amount of just the learning and the ability to apply all those finance and accounting skills to do various banking transactions, you know, it just started to build my confidence. And then as you go along, you start to build up a industry expertise. So for me, it was aerospace, defense, and government services. I'm sure Kim can speak to this as well, being in media. You know, every industry has its own nuances when it comes to how the financial management strategy takes hold. So when I finished my MBA, I went back into banking and then decided I wanted to go the entrepreneurial route. And so now you're taking all of this stuff and now you're an entrepreneur now. So it's not just about the numbers, it's about strategy, operations, human resources, all this stuff. But you've gathered all this knowledge and technical skills along the way. And then I had an opportunity to join Battles. I actually joined them as a finance and operations consultant. So again, as your journey evolves, you start to pick up more skills. So now I have finance skills, I have technical skills, but I also have operational skills. And so you can actually go into organizations and solve problems. And then, from there, after I did my consulting engagement at Battles, they offered me the opportunity to become a CFO. And that's something that I had always wanted to do when I was in undergrad, something I always kind of envisioned myself as I studied finance. And it just happened to be, this was a great opportunity to start from there. So that was my first CFO opportunity. I had actually never worked inside a corporation before, but I felt comfortable because I had done tons of due diligence on different, financial transactions through my banking experience. So, it was just, the journey was kind of just, it was time to take the plunge.
So before I ask Kim the same question, why did you envision yourself as being a CFO in undergrad? What about being a CFO made it sexy enough for you to envision this between the years of 18 and 22?
Yep. I will say this. I think for most people, the pedigree of your school really matters. And at Howard during that time, everybody wanted to work on Wall Street. And I wanted to work on Wall Street as well too, but I also, saw myself kind of inside a firm, managing the capital of the firm and being able to execute deals from the inside. And so I think it's something about the CFO, even when you compare it to like the CEO, which I'm now the CEO of Battles, and the COO, it is very sexy. Like when you say CFO, especially for men, women like men who know how to handle money. And so it is like, it just had this like kind of sex appeal. I'm just being honest. It kind of had like this sex appeal that if you can, you deal with the company, but you don't have to deal, CFO, you don't have to deal with people. And so I kind of found that pretty interesting, that you can make decisions based on numbers without having to kind of deal with all the other stuff that comes with running a business, which is completely different from my role now. So it had a sex appeal to it. It was the early, I was at Howard 99 to 2003. That was the era where everybody wanted to go to Wall Street. So it just kind of happened to be the case where all these kind of things kind of came together, and it just made it,
Lovely. Thank you for your candor. And so Kim, along with Thomas expressing that he thought that it would be sexy, right, to be a CFO, he also expressed that he was on an entrepreneurial side as well as the corporate side. And you yourself are both. And so now when I ask you the same question, what made you want to be or go in that trajectory? Please parse the nuance between being on that trajectory on the corporate side as well as the entrepreneurial side.
Okay. Well, I have an interesting background too, because I graduated from the School of Engineering at Howard University, and I worked as an engineer for the first 5 years of my professional career. And in doing that, the company I work for, we often had to go before like appropriations board to get money for capital projects. And I learned very early that the people who made the decisions, the people who knew what was going on in the company very early on were the people who controlled the purse strings. So that made me want to go into finance. That's when I went back and got my MBA in finance. So from there, I was always interested in media and entertainment. So I took my finance degree and started working for media companies. So that's kind of how I went into that trajectory. And it ended up being true because, when it's time for reducing staffing, when it's time for companies to merge, the people who are doing the analysis and doing the deals are the finance people. So I don't call it sexy. I feel like it's more of empowerment thing, that you're sitting in the room when decisions are being made because they need your skill set. So, you know, that's how I got into that piece of it. In terms of going the entrepreneurial route, the training that you get as a finance professional helps you think strategically. Not only do I do it for my own business, but I do a lot of work with nonprofits and helping them to go from grassroots to thinking on that strategic level to help their organizations grow. So, you know, that's kind of where I position myself.
Fantastic, fantastic. Some may say empowerment is sexy. So,
And I have to say, Dr. Kidd, Thomas, I'm going to have to steal that for my marketing, because you want to be sexy, be a CFO.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let me come to you, Caroline, and let me ask, for your members, what sort of stories have you heard? Are these stories in line with, you know, what they say and maybe why they become a CFO, or at least on the trajectory or path of?
I'm going to tell you, the number one thing is I have never heard of somebody saying they were going to being a CFO is sexy. So I just think that's fantastic. That's number one, but I think that's cool. But people who I know who join our organization who are CFOs, they either I noticed the younger CFOs are people who are coming out who have done and worked in various different departments, and then they end up becoming a CFO. And the baby boomers, and this is just my opinion, I'm noticing they took the tract of working them in the financial department and then just moving up within the organization and being in charge of becoming a CFO. And then also there's some companies where the title CFO is not there. It's their VPs of finance is the highest title that they would have in an organization. So, but what Kim and Thomas have stated, yeah, I've heard on both ends. Okay. It's very interesting.
Interesting. All right, so let's shift the conversation a bit here, and let me discuss in your path, Thomas and Kim, of becoming someone who controls the purse strings and someone who is inside of the room when the deal is made. What sort of hurdles have you had to encounter? Thomas, you first, as an African-American, what sort of hurdles have you encountered, going from LaSalle Bank all the way to battles and sitting in on an M&A deal?
Yep, no, that's a great question. So I'll start with the banking days, Midwest Chicago, folks that are decision makers, C-level executives, they are not used to working with people of color in finance. These are, traditional Midwestern companies, 40, 50, 60-year-old companies, high dollar transactions. When you walk in the room, it is probably literally the first time that they've ever contemplated that a person of color can actually work in finance and work on these deals. So I think that's the biggest, hurdle, is just the people on the other side are just not used to doing this. And then fast forward, to where I am now, whereas I was a person who was kind of, would do back end sort of due diligence, credit analyst, stuff like that. I am the person who's sitting across from the absolute decision maker. And again, it never ceases to amaze me that, sometimes I walk in a room and I feel like, I am the first person of color that this person has ever interacted with when it comes to finance. So that means that when we're discussing deal terms, this may be the first time in their natural born life that they've ever had a Black man tell them what he won't do, or what, his company won't do, or negotiate, or try to get better terms. And then if you look at the history of our people, one of the challenges that we've always had is that in our pursuit to get things, we never, and again, I know we've said we're not going to generalize, but if you look at, let's just take housing, for instance, Black people on average normally pay more in interest rates for their mortgage than any other group. Why? Because we don't go back to the person and say, can I get a better rate? And that's a legacy challenge that we have. And you know, that can impact you for generations. So if you think about a company where we're trying to secure capital, for us, we're getting equipment loans. You know, before I came to Battles, you know, Battles was paying about 13 to 15% for finance deals for vehicles. You know, because nobody was in my position that could take on that challenge of saying, hey, we're a better company than what you're valuing us at. And now we're down into the single digits, like 3 to 4% corporate borrowing rate. And so, you know, this is a 45-year company. I've been here for 9 years. For 30 plus years, nobody was in that in a true dedicated finance position. And so for 30 plus years, you know, the owner who was trying to, you know, who bootstrapped the company, you know, he was just trying to get service clients. But in servicing clients, you know, people on the other side were literally taking them for a ride. And, you know, I advised them of that when I came on board and, you know, corrected that over the past 9 years. But those are, you know, those are challenges. People are just not used to seeing us on the other side of finance. There's other areas where people see us like, you know, D&I, you know, human resources, operations. But when it comes to finance, it's very few of us that sit across the table. Dr. Kidd, you're muted.
Of course I am. So, which brings me to a point that you brought up before, Kim. Before I ask you the same question, your point before was about getting those certificates. So like a CPA or CFA or something of the sort, just so that we could kind of be on the same field. Would you say that if you had, or if Thomas would have had those certificates, then maybe he would not have had such a huge hurdle. And at the very least, the people that he was sitting across the table from would say, well, they do have a certificate, so they must know something.
I think it's hard to say. I think you have to assess each situation individually. I know based on my experiences, when I've tried to push for people of color to have certain positions, I always get the flack, well, they don't have this, they don't have that, even though their white counterparts may not have the same thing. So that's why I encourage people to get the credentials to at least take that piece off the table, and then they have to come up with something else.
Understood. Okay, and so let me just go to Caroline really quickly before I come back to you, Kim, to ask you about your own personal hurdles. Caroline, I don't know if you would have the numbers on this, but you can tell me in a qualitative or anecdotal manner, how many of your members have a certificate or are seeking certificates such as the ones we spoke about before as they make their roll to the C-suite?
That is a very great question, because we do not keep data on people's certificates. I would know from certain people who have told me, but I got to tell you one thing. I want to give one statistic that I thought was very interesting that people should know. I got this from the Wall Street Journal. In 2020, 9.8% of CFO positions in the S&P 500 and Fortune 500 were held by racially diverse executives. And that was up from 8.8% the year before. And in 2020, there were 40 Asians, 14 Latinos, and 12 African Americans out of 675 CFOs. So that's not good. We need to do better.
That is telling. That is telling. And so let me swing back over to you, Kim. Now, Thomas is, of course, African American, and I'm sure he identifies as such. But he is a male, and so sometimes playing the part in finance, it helps to be at least a male. Now, you are Black and a female. So can you please sort of discuss what sort of hurdles you may have had to encounter in your trajectory?
Oh, okay. There's a lot of hurdles, but one thing I would like to say that Black men and Black women who are confident and know their stuff are very intimidating sometimes to their white counterparts. And I'm just talking from my experience working within a company. A lot of times it's less about getting the job done and working around other people's insecurities. And that can provide such roadblocks. The advantage that I had in my situation was that I had worked for the company a very long time. So I had developed trust and people knew my work. So when I did go in a room where decisions were made, it was, you know, you have to push to get your voice heard. And when you do have a good idea, to make sure that you get credit for it, because I know many people who are out there that sat in the room, had this great idea, just to 5 minutes later, hear someone else say it like it came from them. And it's not that you want people to pat you on the back, but when it comes to advancing, when it comes to promotions, you want people to recognize the contributions and the work that you have done. So it's a constant battle. And like I said, everybody's situation is different. And when you're a woman of color and a petite woman of color, they always want to try to dismiss you, but you have to be in a situation where you can speak up. My mother always told me, and this doesn't apply to everyone, never to be afraid to lose a job and compromise, you know, what you stand for and what your morals are. And a lot of times I had to stand up for things that were right and things that were ethical and not be afraid to challenge people who did not want to do that. So, you know, there's a lot of hurdles and I can give specific stories, but just in a nutshell, that's kind of it.
So you said even a petite woman of color, you think even stature has something to do with the amount of hurdles that you have to deal with?
Exactly, exactly. There was one senior executive I used to work for. He was like 6'2", and he used his height to intimidate not just people of color, but like almost everybody, almost like a bully. And you would think these kind of behaviors didn't happen in corporate America, but they do. So, you know, you have to put extra effort into letting your voice be heard and, you know, kind of step outside your comfort zone, especially somebody like me. You know, I like to be quiet and do my work, but the position I was put in, when you start leading a team and you have to advocate for people, you can't be quiet. You have to push forward. You have to be almost like a lioness when it comes to some things.
So if I had a student come in and they told me, hey, look, Dr. Kidd, I think that I want to be put on the path to the C-suite specifically as a CFO because it's sexy, then what would you tell that young woman? Would you say, yes, do it? Or would you say, let's think about something else?
No, I would definitely say yes. If that is your passion, if that is what you want to do it. Participate in panels like this, reach out and get mentors, learn as much as you can, learn what is required to get on the path. Understand everybody, you know, the people that you interact with, understand what their path was, because everybody's path is not going to be the same. So just do your research, do your due diligence, and if that's something you want, go for it, and make sure you have the credentials as you go through it. So that, like I said, they won't use that against you saying, well, you don't have this piece of credential, so we are going to go with someone else.
Understood. And so, look, Caroline, you've heard the hurdles here that, I mean, at this point, I guess we'll call a minority constituents may say, but just non-white CFO and C-suite participants. Now, what sort of data, have you seen that would suggest that it's either getting better or worse or staying the same? And what sort of things should be done to maybe have more inclusion and, of course, diversity?
Oh my God, yes. That's such a great question. You know, right now, women of color account for only 4% of C-suite leaders. I want to just circle back to what Kim was talking about, because I don't know if many of you know this, but Kim and I are also friends. And Kim and I would talk when we would see our mutual friend at the hairdresser. You know, that's what we do. And one of the things that she would talk to me about is some of the issues that she was going through with her organization. And I said, listen, you need to join a peer organization that could help you with some of the issues that you're going through, because sometimes when you are in a position where, you know, you're in an office, there's no one to talk to who's on the same level as you. So it's important to go, I'm not just touting my own organization, but for any peer organization, there are many out there that could assist you with helping you get to that next level. Do not think that you're alone, because you're not. And I was so happy the day that Kim spoke to me, because I was like, listen, here's what you need to do. Come to this program, see if you like it. Here are some skill sets that we can be able to help you. And it helps. So always, I tell anyone who is, no matter where you are, if you're a CFO or any other, reach out to a peer organization so you could be able to get to that next level.
Thanks. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right, let's shift the topic here a little bit, right? And let's talk about the impact to a company. And so when we say chief financial officer, I think we have attempted in our 30 minutes or so discussion to define exactly what that is. Now, can someone sort of chime in and tell me what sort of impact controlling the purse strings of a company actually has on the company? I'll throw it to you, Kim, first, of course, and then Thomas, I'll throw it to you afterwards.
Okay, I think it has a significant impact in controlling the company. For a CFO, I think it's important that they understand who their end users are. I know that in my position, you know, I was a finance professional, but I also dealt with creatives, editorial people, production people, on-air talent, and their measure of success is different from, say, the company's measure of success. They like to see their end product. They may get awards for it. It's like their masterpiece. It's an art. So when you come in and you talk about cost control and cutting back on budgets, it becomes, you know, a little bit of a tug of war. So I think it's important for the CFO of a company or any finance professional in a company to be ingrained in the end user's process. One of the things that I used to do as I came up the ranks and I was assigned different shows to oversee their budgets, I would make sure that I sat in on the editorial meetings. I would sit in on the production meetings. I think it was important for me to understand what their processes are and also how the financial decisions impacted what they did. So once you get that level of trust between your end users and the CFO, you can make a bigger impact when you're making changes in the company, when you're going through transitions, when you're trying to cut back on costs to, you know, to improve your bottom line. So
Interesting. Of course, Kim has a unique spin because she worked with creatives. Thomas, you're in logistics. How is being a CFO impacting the logistics company that you work for?
Definitely. And let me start this off with a funny story. When you know you're a CFO, if you ever see me in a grocery store, I always have my calculator with me because I am always looking at like the per unit cost of just about everything I'm going to buy. I want to know that I'm getting the most bang for my buck with every dollar that I spend. So if you ever see me in the grocery store, I will have my phone or a calculator with me, and I'm crunching numbers like right there on the spot. And you know,
Thomas, I just want to interject. I do the same thing. Whenever I'm at an entertainment event, I'm looking around and say, okay, how much did they spend on this? I think it's just something that we do.
Yeah. And so, you know, as in this role, especially when I occupied it before I became you know, CEO of Battles, you're trying to gauge kind of, you know, what you're spending, and you're trying to align it with what you think the market's expectations are. And you're trying to find the intersection of those two things. So for us in ground passenger transport, you know, we're trying to identify, you know, who our core markets are. And then, you know, our biggest investment is vehicles. So, you know, the array of vehicles has to match our clients' expectations. And so, you know, when I'm in that role, you know, a lot of decisions around what vehicle to buy, you know, what features does the vehicle need? Does the market kind of anticipate? Are there like any kind of shifts? So, I would say to a CFO, you have to have, which kind of, in some cases will separate, CFOs from accountants and CPAs, is that you have to take a very broad view of the markets that you engage in, so that you're not missing what you think your clients' expectations are. And you get it right if they continue to consume. So, what I would do a lot in the logistics space is I would always look at like other companies. I would compare us against like the airline space. Who do you operate like? Do you operate like Delta, or do you operate like Spirit? Do you make decisions, or does your market expect you to operate in such a way? And that's the core objective of the CFO, is really to understand how money is being spent in the organization, whether or not it's being spent appropriately, tracking, identifying things, kind of this constant review of things, and then being able to communicate those outcomes to other members of the C-suite and board. And for me, in my position, I'm also engaging with a lot of folks outside of the company. So, our corporate bank that we work with, because it's funny, banks, because they have so much leverage, banks actually sort of position themselves as the client, and you're like the vendor. You're serving them. So they actually have like a lot of reporting, a lot of financial metrics that you have to meet in order for you to remain a client of their bank. And so there's a lot of engagement there, and they're looking for you to be able to communicate the position of your company relative to what you're asking for in terms of capital. And like I say, I also work with a lot of CPAs, and then I'm always negotiating. So I'm the prime negotiator for our company. So how do we price these goods and services so that we can continue to drive a profit and make the business sustainable, so we can continue to operate and service our various markets.
Good deal. So there's a lot there to unpack, but let me touch on a few things. And I'm certainly sure that the bankers in our audience are basically saying, oh, be quiet, Thomas, just give us the reports, right? All right, so that question was very specific to the company, and maybe some people even got broader to the industry of what you guys and who you guys impact or affect. And so now I'm going to flip it over to you, Caroline, and I want to say, have you had any of your members or clientele sort of give you an even broader sort of want or desire to impact society as being a CFO? And if so, what does that look like?
Wow, ever since George Floyd passed away in May of 2020, many CFOs have come to us and they're wanting to start diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And it's interesting because, and just to give you a background, we as an organization, the organization that I work for, we were at that point. And I have to say, I was very, very proud to say that the founder of the organization, Jack McCullough, came to me. He says, when he saw what was going on, he said, I want to do something, Caroline. And is it possible if you could help? And we got our company together, and at the top down, he was like, we're going to do something about this. And I have to say, I was very proud at that moment to be part. I was always proud of where I worked, but I was even prouder of that. But then the next thing that came up was like, okay, how are we going to do this? And that's what a lot of CFOs are having right now. So we figured out a way, and I was fortunate, and this is a little story, just so people can understand. Jack and I turned to a good friend of mine who was the head of DE&I at Goldman, but she's now at Cushman Wakefield, Nadine Augusta. Please follow her on LinkedIn if you can. And she took the time to sit down with Jack and myself and some of our colleagues to talk about some of the points that we needed to build out our program and what we should be doing. And then we also, we started a steering committee, because we always have steering committees for our groups. And another good person helped us was a woman named C.B. Bowman, another person you should follow on LinkedIn. She has 2 great programs. She talks about the C-suite, how to get to the C-suite, how to build out diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And just we put programs on so that people who are CFOs can understand how to do that. And one of the things that CFOs need to start to is to look within their organizations and speak to the people who are below them and figure out what's going on and how they can improve the culture of their organization on top of getting a consultant. You don't want just a consultant coming in and building out a DEI and you just push it to the side. No, it's all inclusive. So those are some of the things that our CFOs have been wanting to learn, and they also want to be able to, okay, if I have a DEI program, how do I keep it going? Because I have people who are not interested, or my workers who work underneath me, I don't feel like they don't want to take part in this program. So there's a lot of education and learning and growing. There are a lot of statistics out there that show that when you have a diverse workforce, the company grows. So it's important for a CFO to understand that and to want people from diverse backgrounds to be able to join their organization so it can grow. So we teach CFOs how to do that and the steps they need to get to that level.
Thank you. For my other guests, Thomas and Kim, specifically, how do you think that diversity within the CFO's office, so I guess that would be CFO would be the boss and everyone under him or her, how do you think that would impact your business? I mean, Caroline has said that it will grow your business. Can you speak to how you think that diversity will grow your business? Of course, Thomas, I'm going to always go with Kim first. Kim, are you there, or did we lose her? It looks like we may have lost her.
Frozen, yep. You know, I'll take it until she gets online.
Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Okay, so you know, I look at well, you know, I have the good fortune in my current career path where you know, Battles in RSG, 100+ employees, and we are all minorities. So in a sense, it kind of eliminates some of the challenges, but it doesn't alleviate the need for diversity. So as I look at my team and I look at the people who are in different positions, like, you know, people that work in finance and HR and operations, you know, it becomes more about, you know, diversity of thought and also recognizing people's own, you know, unique talents and also investing in people. Because I think one of the issues that minority-owned companies, one of the challenges, no matter how big or small we are, we're not as keen on training people as we should be. And I've seen this through, you know, just other organizations that I interact with in the business that, you know, you have this management team, but the executive team is not investing. So continuous training, learning. And so one of the things I learned from working at big corporations like Bank of America and LaSalle Bank, there was a lot of training and a lot of training opportunities and a lot of opportunities for advancement. And so I think that's really important. That's really core to my beliefs and, you know, just investing in people. And I even look at it like this, like, hey, if I help you build your skill set, you know, it makes you more marketable in the workforce and the labor workforce. But in the meantime, if you sort of buy into the fact that I'm investing in you, you're going to contribute more heavily to the company that, and it's a gamble, right? Because I'm actually, you know, in a sense, making you a better professional. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take for the sake of your individual growth and the corporate growth. And I think the more you invest in people, the more you show them your diversity, that you care about, you know, women having a voice and, you know, other people in the company having a voice, and it's not male dominated, which tends to be the case in most large corporations. You know, people really buy into that, and then they really come to work excited and they want to drive results. Now, in the broader marketplace, you know, the commitment to DEI initiatives, it has to be there because, you know, you can see by Caroline's numbers, there's just not a lot of, you know, folks of color and you know, men or women that actually get a chance to become CFO. And I think it has little to do with the technical skills. And I think it's just it's institutional racism. It's a construct that people, and getting over this notion that, you know, people of color don't know how to manage money and don't know how to make executive level decisions. So there has to be a push in these large corporations to just really, you know, make sure that that pathway is there, that people see an opportunity and get a fair shot at, you know, having an opportunity to be a CFO at a large corporation.
Good, good. So as we work, as the team works to bring back Kimberly, let me swing it over to you, Caroline. And I assume that your membership has diversity included, and that diversity is possibly age, right? And so let me ask you, if any members have come to you with some sort of anecdotal evidence, it could be even quantifiable evidence of the changing of the role of a CFO. Has it changed? And if it has changed, back when, I don't know, I'm going to call him Aaron, was a CFO in 1950, all the way to now we have Thomas as a CFO in 2021, 2022. How has the role changed, if it has?
A lot more of the CFOs now, at one point in time, they focused on accounting, but now, you know, just on financial matters and they reporting requirements and financial strategy. But I think I mentioned this before. These days, a CFO has expanded that role into accounting and finance, and they now have to work with, some of them are now in charge of human resource departments. Some of them are also in charge of information technology and risk management. So they need to know a lot more about these roles, that it's more than finance. So that's why we were circling back on saying that if someone is interested in becoming a CFO, it might be best to get that MBA as opposed to just focusing on the CPA, because now people want more of their CFOs to have a broader aspect, you know, a broader role in the organization. And on top of that, and Thomas, you could tell me on this, CFOs also have to be able to speak to the board and the CEO. So you have to be able to work all these different departments and people within the organization. So you could be able to, you know, to be able to, they're more leaders now than, and many of the CFOs turn into CEOs because of that. You are one of them. You are a CFO and you became a CEO.
And Carolyn, I'll tell you something that was something that had a very profound impact on me when I went to Howard. There was this large company, I can't remember the name, but they were based in Chicago. And the CEO got up and introduced himself, and it was like an engineering or pharmaceutical company. So, you know, logical thinking will lead you to believe that, you know, whoever leads the company has to have a background sort of in that discipline. So if it's an engineering firm, he's going to be a previous engineer that kind of worked his way up to the ranks. This guy was a finance professional. And I was thinking to myself, like, how did he go from being a finance guy to running a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company? You know, it really had a profound impact on me, and it kind of stuck with me. Even the most recent CEO of Intel, he was a CFO. And, you know, that kind of shows you, you know, that it's about being able to speak to the industry and being able to understand how the industry works. And, you know, there was this concept when I was at Howard, you know, my first few finance courses, it was called the asymmetry of information, right? Meaning that people inside the firm knew more than people on the outside of the firm. But now in the information age and the digital age, people have more access to information. I mean, you could literally go up and learn more about your competition. You have more resources to help you make financial decisions. You have more sources of information that have to be vetted. People know more about you and you know more about them. But at the end of the day, strategic decisions still have to be made. But there's a lot more information that you can use to make those things. So the CFO of old would kind of have the advantage of being the insider, but now your external partners and stakeholders know just as much about your firm, even if you're not publicly traded. They know a lot about your company. They know the contracts that you have. They know, different press releases. They know where you rank. And so people use that to kind of engage in the market. And, with that and the amount of information, you have to be able to communicate things and still be able to execute in a way that has an impact on your organization. But it's definitely a different era for CFOs.
So what I heard from you two is that we went from bean counters to leaders, and leaders that need to know how to communicate and communicate effectively. That is sort of the transformation of the role of a CFO. And now as we come into the home stretch, I'm so happy that we have Kim's beautiful face back. I'm going to put one of two of our final questions to you. So now that we've discussed the impact of the CFO, we are in a unique time right now. I mean, Caroline has discussed George Floyd. We're in the middle of a pandemic, clearly, because we're online, right? And the interest in what we call ESG, environmental, social governance, has hit, let's say, an all-time high, and I hope the trajectory is still going up. How has the globalism and the pandemic and the interest in ESG impacted the role of the CFO? That's to you, Kim.
Okay, I think, and I apologize for my technical difficulties, and I'm sorry I missed part of the program, but I think the CFO has an important part in the impact of the society. I think we have a unique skill set that we can use to help specifically organizations who deal directly with societal issues or impact globally, helping them to be financially viable so they can grow and they can continue to do their message. One of the things that I do is I do work with an organization. It's called Real Sisters of the Diaspora Film Festival. And what they do is they elevate the messages of women of color from around the world. They started off as like a grassroots organization that was local, but I've been able to help them position themselves for a strategy for growth. That way, their messages for women of color advocating for women's issues can be distributed globally. So I do believe that, we have an important part to play in terms of impacting our society just based on our skill sets and being able to aid organizations that, can really make a difference.
All right, so we're coming into the close here, right? And if I can ask each guest here to be as brief as possible, can you please list for me the 3 roles and/or attributes that are most important for any CFO to have? And Kim, since you are unmuted and you just came back on, please go first.
Okay. One of the 3 things I think is one, solid technical skills, solid accounting skills. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to be a CPA. I'm not a CPA, but I have a strong foundation in accounting because sometimes you have to use that to be a problem solver. Anytime you go through any kind of transformation within a company, you have to know how it's going to be reflected on the books. Also, I think communication is key. Being able to communicate to non-finance people specific strategies so that they feel like they have an investment into it and they understand it enough to help you fulfill whatever that mission may be. The third thing is understanding your particular industry. And I think I caught the tail end of Thomas saying that, but understanding, how your financial decisions impact the people who eventually put your end product out there. So those are the three things: strong technical skills, communications, and understanding your industry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thomas, if you can be as brief as Kim.
Definitely. I think integrity is really important. Being a person of good character, because you are, you have, depending on the size of your organization, whether it's $1 or millions of dollars, you're the person that's controlling the inflow and outflow of that cash. And so people have to be able to trust you and trust that what you put on the financial, when you do your financial reporting, that is as accurate as possible. And there are challenges with accounting, and Kim can probably attest to this, that sometimes you miss things and things have to be re-recorded and reclassified. But it has to be, you have to be a person of integrity to be in a role. Definitely think technical skills are important. So I want to talk about that. I think confidence, because when you are communicating financial results, whether good or bad, I don't know if you ever listened to an earnings call before, but a CFO at a company that just lost, $3 billion, I'm amazed at how confident that person can say, well, we'll get it back next quarter. We're on a path to right the ship. And it takes a lot of confidence to get in front of a board and say, hey, I lost, $3-4 million because of decisions that I either co-signed on or, I supported, or different endeavors. And, knowing that you have to position the company to rebound from that. So yes, integrity, technical skills, and confidence in what you do and how you communicate.
Fantastic. I'm definitely sure integrity can be, that can be another whole program in and of itself with respects to CFOs and accounting. Caroline.
Yep, I'll be quick. I got this from The Secrets of Rockstar CFOs by Jack McCullough.
You're cheating, Caroline.
I'll send you a copy. Walk the floor. Step out from behind your desk and understand what your business does and its position in the marketplace. Number 2, join a peer group. I'm not toting myself, but we're saying find a new job or solve an unsolvable problem. This is what a group can help you. So don't ever feel that you're alone. Always join a peer group so you can be able to feel that you could get to that next level. You don't have to feel stressed and feel alone. Number 3, establish a code of ethics. Never lose sight of your opportunity to create and nurture an ethical culture within your company. Ethics is very important. You should always keep that with you.
Beautiful, beautiful. So look, gang, I think we've covered the CFO and all of his intricacies abound, right? I hear from you guys that you are sexy and empowered people who watch the purse, and you are definitely needed to your company, to the industry, and to society. Now, if there are anyone who wants to contact either Thomas Dominique, Kim Singleton, or Caroline Boyce, here is the information here. You can also, of course, contact me at the School of Business, and my email address is just there. We are coming up on our time, and we are slightly over our time, but I definitely want to thank my esteemed panel. This was a perfect discussion. I think that we definitely should sort of unpack ethics in the role of CFO. I am Dr. Curtis Kidd Telemock, and I will sign off. Thank you to my guests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.